While conducting an intoxicated driving investigation at a gas station in Bluffdale, Utah, at around midnight on January 2nd, police found the body of 30-year-old Summer Tatiana Roney in the backseat of 40-year-old Jacob Holt Johnson's car. According to a probable cause statement, Roney's body bore significant injuries and trauma that would be consistent with a homicide. Johnson reportedly told police that he and Roney were in a relationship, and while he did not elaborate on how Roney got her injuries, he admitted that they had gotten into an argument. He said that he told Roney their relationship was over and admitted to putting her body in his car. Police booked Johnson into the Salt Lake County Jail without bail, where he remains in custody on suspicion of first-degree murder. He has multiple prior convictions, including DUI, felony drug possession, and aggravated robbery. Number 14. Matthew Livelsberger. After serving in the U.S. Army for nearly 2 decades, 37-year-old Matthew Livelsberger rented a Tesla Cybertruck and blew it up outside the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas on New Year's Day. 7 people were injured, and while Livelsberger did not survive the stunt, some clues are helping to explain his possible motive. The incident occurred 6 days after the elite Special Forces soldier and his wife got into an argument at their home in Colorado Springs about his alleged cheating. Described by a relative as a Rambo-type patriot who staunchly supported Donald Trump, Livelsberger text messaged an old girlfriend a few days before the explosion and bragged about the Cybertruck, telling her he felt like Batman. In a note left behind on Livelsberger's charred cell phone, he described America's current leadership as weak and the U.S. as terminally ill and headed toward collapse. He urged people to wake up, and while officials do not believe this was an act of terrorism, an FBI spokesperson said it's not lost on us that it happened in front of the Trump building and a Tesla vehicle was used. The investigation is ongoing. Number 13. Bianca Miranda. A Brazilian woman was left with third-degree burns on her body after a stray sparkler landed on her chest during New Year's Eve fireworks. 27-year-old Bianca Miranda and her husband were watching the explosive display from an apartment in Navegantes, Santa Catarina state when the incident occurred, causing Miranda to scream in pain. Miranda backed away from the window and scrambled to extinguish the flames with help from her husband, Victor Frasca. The rogue firework melted some of her skin, leaving her with third-degree burns to the chest and second-degree burns to the hand. Frasca rushed Miranda to the hospital, where she received pain medication, anti-inflammatories, and antibiotics, along with instructions for the continued care of her burns. Number 12. Michael Blount. In one of New York City's latest headline-making subway attacks, 29-year-old convicted predator Michael Blount slashed his 37-year-old ex-girlfriend and shoved her onto the tracks along a Manhattan A-train platform. Blount was out on parole for previous offenses when the late-night incident occurred on November the 5th at the 125th Street station, where his ex tried to protect herself as he repeatedly reached for her neck with a razor blade. The attack happened in front of the victim's 2 daughters, who were able to pull their mother back onto the platform 2 minutes before the next train arrived. With help from a bystander, they caught a cab to a hospital where the woman underwent reconstructive surgery. Prior to the attack, Blount had harassed the victim and her daughters at a Harlem deli. After following them to the subway station, he returned to the deli and bought the razor blade that was used in the attack. Blount fled the scene and remained on the run for several weeks while continuing to harass the victim and her daughters. He was finally arrested on December 28th, and on January 1st he was indicted on multiple charges, including attempted murder. Number 11. Gia Cruz. In New York City's third murder of 2025, U.S. Postal Service worker Ray Hodges was stabbed inside a deli in broad daylight after stepping in front of a woman in line. The 36-year-old was rushed to the hospital where he died from his injuries. Sources told the New York Post that the suspect, 24-year-old Gia Cruz, went crazy and stabbed Hodges in the stomach. Police retrieved the murder weapon and Cruz was arrested at the scene on suspicion of second-degree murder. Cruz has at least 5 prior arrests and a history of knife violence, including an incident in July of 2020 when she was accused of threatening to slash someone with a box cutter. She's being held at Rikers Island without bail as she awaits her next court hearing. News of Hodges' murder came as a shock to those who knew him, including a co-worker who described him in a New York Times interview as hard-working, laid back and quiet, adding, "Sometimes you didn't even know he was there." Number 10. The murder of Alberto Olivas Garcia. Mexican immigration agent Alberto Olivas Garcia was murdered in broad daylight on December 30th after he approached a group of migrants near the US border and asked for their identification documents. The attack occurred at the Precos Samalayuca migration checkpoint, roughly 30 miles south of Ciudad Juarez, which is directly across the border from El Paso, Texas. By the time emergency crews found Garcia, he had succumbed to his injuries. He had been stabbed and beaten to death with a blunt object, most likely a rock. The tragic killing came just hours after Garcia received an award recognizing him for 30 years of service as an immigration agent. Two Colombian nationals identified only as 36-year-old Carlos A.S. and 29-year-old David Jose B. have been arrested in connection with the murder. They have yet to face formal charges in the case. Number 9. Shamsu Din Baja Jabar. At around 3 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Day, 42-year-old U.S. Army veteran Shamsu Din Baja Jabar rammed a rented pickup truck into a crowd on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, killing at least 15 people and injuring 35 others. He reportedly ran over as many people as he could before exiting the truck and firing an assault rifle at people. Officers returned fire and killed Jabar, who had pledged his allegiance to ISIS and announced plans to kill his family in disturbing online videos shortly before the ramming incident. Harrowing footage of the attack appears to show Jabar stepping out of the truck and shooting while panicked partygoers rushed for cover. News of the attack shocked neighbors and community members, who described Jabar as a quiet man who kept mostly to himself and held a well-paying job, despite the run-down condition of the trailer he lived in. While a motive has not been officially revealed, Jabar's ex-wife's current husband said that his behavior became increasingly erratic in the months leading up to the attack. The investigation is ongoing. Number 8. The murder of Dy Silva. 34-year-old Dy Silva and a friend were on their way back to a rented condominium in Rio de Janeiro on December 28th when their Uber driver mistakenly drove into a crime-riddled favela. Someone opened fire on the vehicle, shooting the driver, 34-year-old Anderson Pinheiro, in the back, while Silva was struck by at least 3 bullets. Silva, who had traveled from the neighboring state of Sao Paulo to ring in the new year with 6 friends, died at the scene. Pinheiro was able to continue driving long enough to flag down a police unit. He was rushed to the hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery and ultimately survived. It's unclear whether any arrests have been made. Number 7. Uran Sharif. 43-year-old Uran Sharif was just weeks into a 40-year sentence for torturing and killing his young daughter when 2 fellow inmates slashed his neck with the lid of a tuna can at a prison in South London. The incident, which occurred on New Year's Day, left Sharif in critical condition and scarred for life. Sharif's assailants were reportedly sickened to learn that he had bitten, burned, and beaten his daughter during the attack that claimed her life. According to reports, he suffered non-threatening cuts to the face and neck and received medical treatment inside the prison. In a statement, prison officials conceded that this type of attack was most likely only a matter of time due to the nature of Sharif's crime. One prisoner was even quoted as saying that the attack couldn't have happened to a more deserving guy. Sharif had had a target on his back ever since arriving at the prison, despite his efforts to keep a low profile and guards' efforts to keep him safe. The incident remains under investigation. Number 6. Camille Hawkins. A New York City man is facing attempted murder and assault charges after shoving someone onto the tracks at a Manhattan subway station on New Year's Eve. In what appears to be a random attack, 23-year-old Camille Hawkins approached the 45-year-old victim on the 18th Street station platform and paced nearby for several seconds before shoving him in front of an oncoming train. The victim miraculously survived with critical injuries after falling perfectly in the trench and being rescued by firefighters, and Hawkins was arrested shortly thereafter. According to an NYPD spokesperson, the suspect and victim do not appear to have any connections. Hawkins was previously accused of assaulting a police officer in 2019 and has a pending case consisting of assault, harassment, and weapons charges. He's being held without bail at Rikers Island as he awaits his next court hearing. Number 5. Family massacred in Mexico. Nearly an entire American family was massacred during a vacation in Las Palmas, Mexico On December 27th, the victims, which include 38-year-old Vicente Peña Jr., his teenage son, his 44-year-old uncle Antonio Fernandez, and 22-year-old Jorge Eduardo Vargas Aguirre, were driving in an SUV with Illinois plates when gunfire broke out. Peña, Fernandez, and Vargas Aguirre were killed, while Peña's son survived and is reportedly fighting for his life. Authorities have revealed few details to the public about what led up to the incident. The family's vehicle was found abandoned on the road with their bodies nearby and the survivor clinging to life. There were multiple gunshot wounds to the victim's head and shoulders, indicating that they were targeted by their killers. No arrests have been made in connection with the mass killing, which happened amid an alarming crime surge across Durango. Number 4. The murder of James Waldy. 56-year-old James Waldy was stabbed to death in his Las Vegas apartment by his own daughter just hours after the preteen tried to run away. The girl had been dropped off at home by the police, who had responded to the residence several times before, including after a previous runaway attempt. About a week later, the girl had been arrested for injuring her father during a fight. Waldy's daughter initially blamed his murder on a home intruder, but eventually confessed to the crime. She's being held in custody at the Clark County Juvenile Detention Center on a murder charge. Number 3. Edgar Campos. A neighborly dispute between two Australian men took a deadly turn on December 28th when 42-year-old Edgar Campos allegedly strangled 60-year-old Michael Wickham to death during an argument about a fallen tree. According to reports, the large tree had fallen in Campos's yard and landed on a neighboring property where Wickham and his father lived. CCTV footage showed Wickham going to Campos's house, where a conversation between the two men quickly devolved into a shoving and yelling match. The two could also be seen throwing punches at one another and falling to the ground as they fought with one another. Emergency responders were unable to revive Wickham, who was reportedly a well-liked member of his community and his elderly father's sole caretaker. Campos was arrested on a murder charge and remains held without bail amid the ongoing case. Number 2. Brooklyn gang shooting. More than 100 people were gathered at a memorial for a slain Brooklyn teenager on New Year's Day when 4 gunmen opened fire, leaving 10 injured. The incident occurred outside the Amazura nightclub in Queens, where a crowd of dozens had gathered to pay their respects to teenager Tierion Mongo, who was murdered in October. Because the club could only accommodate 90 people, there was a crowd gathered outside waiting for other visitors to leave so they could go in. The victims suffered non-life-threatening injuries, but neighbors told the New York Post that violence is nothing new on that block, where things are known to frequently get out of hand among weekend partiers. Mungo was reportedly affiliated with a street gang called FNO, leading to the suspicion that his murder may have been gang-related. Police believe that the recent shooting may be linked to FNO, and all 4 perpetrators remain at large as the investigation continues. Number 1. Ian Kramer. North Dakota Senator Kevin Kramer's adult son, 43-year-old Ian Kramer, was sentenced to 28 years in prison for crimes stemming from a high-speed car chase that occurred in December of 2023. 53-year-old Mercer County Sheriff's Deputy Paul Martin was setting up a tire deflation device ahead of Kramer's vehicle when he was fatally struck by his own patrol vehicle. The chase began after authorities received a 911 call from Kramer's family, who reported that he had commandeered his mother's SUV following a hospital visit earlier that day. Kramer's mother had taken him to the hospital due to hallucinations about his deceased brother, Ike, and the family was able to track the SUV's movements. The chase reached speeds of up to 100 miles per hour before it finally ended. Kramer has a lengthy history of police run-ins and has long struggled with mental health issues as well as the effects of long-term drug use. He apologized to Martin's family during the sentencing hearing and will most likely serve less than his full term before being released.